Deputy Ryan Carter rubbed a tired hand over his face as he stepped out of his patrol car, stretching his aching muscles. The night shift had been long, filled with noise and paperwork, and all he wanted now was the comfort of his couch and a few hours of sleep. The crisp autumn air did little to wake him up as he started down the sidewalk toward his apartment, his boots echoing against the pavement. That was when he heard it, the steady click of nails on concrete. Ryan slowed, glancing over his shoulder. A German shepherd, large and lean, padded along behind him at a careful distance. Its thick coat was dull, its ribs faintly visible beneath its fur, and its ears twitched with every sound of the quiet street. The dog wasn't just wandering, it was following him. "Go home, bud," Ryan muttered, waving a hand to shoo it away. The dog stopped but didn't turn back, its dark eyes locked onto his, filled with something Ryan couldn't quite place. Not just hunger, not fear, something else. Ryan sighed and kept walking. A few steps later, the dog was right behind him again, keeping pace as if it had a mission. Seriously? Ryan turned fully this time, his exhaustion flaring into frustration. The dog stopped again, frozen in place, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it sat down right there on the sidewalk, its massive tail sweeping the ground in slow, deliberate strokes. Ryan exhaled sharply, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He had no time for stray dogs, no patience for sob stories, and yet, something about this one gnawed at him. With a reluctant grunt, he knelt down, extending his hand. "All right, let's see who you belong to." That was when he saw it, the thick, worn leather collar hanging loosely around its neck. And tucked inside, barely visible in the dim glow of the streetlights, was a crumpled scrap of paper. Ryan's gut twisted as he carefully pulled it out and unfolded it. "Please help us. My sister is sick. No food, no water." Apartment 7C. His exhaustion vanished in an instant. Ryan looked at the dog who had risen to its feet, ears alert, tail still. There was no doubt now. This wasn't just a stray. This dog had come to find him, and it wasn't about to give up. Before we continue, take a moment for yourself. Grab a warm cup of tea or a glass of water and get comfortable. You deserve this time to unwind. I know life can feel lonely sometimes, but you're not alone here. Let's dive into the next part of this incredible story together. Ryan's exhaustion evaporated as adrenaline surged through his veins. He gripped the crumpled note tighter, his pulse pounding in his ears. "My sister is sick. No food, no water." Apartment 7C. He looked at the German shepherd, now standing tall, its ears perked, eyes locked onto his. It let out a low whine and took a step forward as if urging him to move. Ryan didn't hesitate. He turned on his heel and broke into a sprint, the dog immediately matching his pace. His boots pounded against the pavement, his breath coming in quick, controlled bursts. The empty streets blurred past him as he followed the only guide he had, the desperate message and the dog who refused to be ignored. The apartment complex loomed ahead, a crumbling relic of neglect. Paint peeled from the walls in jagged strips, and flickering fluorescent lights buzzed in the dim lobby. The dog didn't pause. It pushed forward, leading Ryan down a grimy hallway lined with doors, each one marked with rusted numbers. The air was thick with the stale scent of mildew and something else, something worse. The dog stopped abruptly at 7 degrees Celsius. Its tail was stiff, its body tense. Ryan knocked hard. "Police, open up!" Silence. He knocked again, harder this time. The door barely rattled. It was solid, heavy. The dog let out a sharp, urgent bark, pawing at the threshold. Ryan's gut twisted. Something's wrong. He reached for the handle. Locked. His training kicked in. He took a step back, braced himself, and drove his shoulder into the door. It didn't budge. A second attempt. Nothing. The dog barked again, a desperate, almost pleading sound. Ryan didn't waste another second. He positioned himself, kicked hard next to the lock, once, twice, until the frame cracked and the door slammed open. The smell hit him first. Then he saw them. The stench of rot and neglect hit Ryan like a fist to the gut. He coughed, instinctively raising an arm to his nose. But the overwhelming mix of sweat, spoiled food, and something sour clung to the air. Then his eyes adjusted to the dim light and his stomach clenched. In the far corner of the tiny, filthy apartment, two figures huddled together. A boy, no older than 10, sat against the stained wall, his arms locked protectively around a much smaller child. His face was pale, gaunt, his lips dry and cracked. His clothes hung loose on his thin frame, and his hollow eyes locked onto Ryan with a mix of terror and desperate hope. Ryan's gaze dropped to the bundle in his arms. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, limp against her brother's chest. Even from across the room, Ryan could see the unnatural flush of fever painting her cheeks. Her breathing was fast and shallow, her tiny fingers twitching against her brother's sleeve. The boy flinched as Ryan stepped closer, his grip tightening around the girl. He pressed himself against the wall as if trying to disappear into it, his entire body trembling. The German shepherd broke the moment first, trotting forward, its tail low, ears back. Instead of barking, it whined softly and nudged the boy's arm with its nose. That was what shattered the dam. The boy's rigid posture crumbled, and silent tears spilled down his cheeks. His chest heaved, but no sound came out, like he'd learned long ago that crying out loud was dangerous. Ryan knelt, keeping his voice low and steady. "Hey there, buddy. I'm Deputy Carter. I'm here to help." The boy didn't respond. He just clutched the girl tighter, his bony fingers gripping her like she might vanish. Ryan's chest tightened. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I need paramedics at my location. 2 juveniles, one unresponsive, the other severely malnourished." The dog whined, pressing its nose into the boy's shoulder. Ryan put a hand on the kid's arm, gentle but firm. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." The boy's grip on his sister trembled. Then finally he let go. The moment the boy loosened his grip, Ryan carefully scooped the little girl into his arms. She was far too light, her body limp, her skin clammy with fever. Up close, he could see just how fragile she was. Cheeks sunken, dark circles beneath her closed eyes. Her breaths were shallow, uneven, each one rattling in her tiny chest. The boy instantly tensed, his body coiled like a spring, as if ready to fight for her. "I've got her," Ryan reassured him, his voice firm but gentle. "We're getting her help, but I need you to come with me, all right?" The boy didn't move. His eyes darted between Ryan and his sister, panic flickering across his face. Then the dog moved. The German shepherd nudged the boy's side, pressing its warm body against his leg. It let out a soft whine, a sound full of quiet reassurance, as if telling the boy it was okay. Finally, the boy nodded. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. Ryan shifted the girl against his chest and stood, guiding the boy toward the door with his free hand. The dog stayed at his side, never straying more than a step away. As they reached the threshold, the first distant wail of sirens filled the air. Relief surged through Ryan, but it was quickly overshadowed by another feeling. A sharp, protective instinct that clenched deep in his gut. Who had left these kids to rot in that apartment? And why hadn't anyone come looking for them? By the time they reached the sidewalk, red and blue lights painted the buildings in a rhythmic glow. Paramedics rushed forward, their voices clipped and urgent. Ryan gently passed the girl into waiting arms. Severe dehydration, possible fever seizure, he reported, his voice steadier than he felt. The boy lunged forward as they laid his sister on the stretcher, his small hands grabbing at the straps. "She's gonna be okay," Ryan promised, gripping the boy's shoulders. "They're gonna take care of her." But the boy wasn't listening. His fingers dug into Ryan's uniform, clinging with everything he had. Ryan felt it then, the unspoken plea, the silent terror in those desperate hands. This kid had no one, and Ryan knew with absolute certainty he couldn't walk away. The paramedics worked quickly, securing IV lines and checking the little girl's vitals as they loaded her into the ambulance. The boy refused to let go of Ryan's uniform, his small fingers twisted into the fabric like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. His breaths were shallow, panicked, his chest rising and falling too fast. Ryan crouched down to his level, keeping his voice steady, firm. "She's in good hands, kid. They're gonna help her." The boy's eyes flickered toward the ambulance, then back to Ryan. His grip tightened. "You're coming with me," Ryan said, making the decision right then and there. The boy hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Ryan stood, lifting the boy into his arms without a second thought, settling him on his hip the way he'd seen other dads do with their kids. The German shepherd trotted beside them, its tail low, ears alert. They climbed into the back of the ambulance, the doors slamming shut behind them. The inside was a blur of movement, monitors beeping, voices urgent but controlled. Ryan sat on the bench seat, the boy pressed tight against his side, still clutching his shirt. The dog curled at their feet, its body tense, eyes fixed on the little girl. The paramedic glanced over. "You family?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "Yeah." The boy's fingers tensed at the word. Ryan glanced down at him, watching his face. The kid didn't correct him. Instead, he whispered, "Will she die?" Ryan exhaled, squeezing the boy's hand. "Not on my watch." The ambulance lurched forward, sirens wailing as they sped toward the hospital. The boy didn't let go of Ryan, and Ryan knew, even as his mind reeled from the weight of what he'd just said, that he wasn't going to let go of the boy either. Life teaches us that family isn't always about blood. It's about who stays, who cares, and who refuses to give up on us. Ryan didn't set out to become a father, yet when faced with 2 abandoned children, he made a choice: to stand by them, to protect them, and to give them a home. So many people, especially as they grow older, understand the deep ache of loneliness, of waiting for someone to return, of wondering if they truly belong. But just like those children found an unexpected guardian in Ryan, we too can find family in the people who choose to be there for us. This story reminds us that small acts of kindness can change lives. A single moment of compassion, a decision to stay instead of walk away, can make all the difference. Maybe it's checking in on a neighbor, reaching out to an old friend, or simply listening when someone needs to be heard. No one should feel forgotten. No one should feel alone. And sometimes the love we've been searching for finds us in the most unexpected ways.